Hey friend, welcome to the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Emily Cleghorn. This podcast is for mamas navigating childhood trauma while also walking through mamahood. I'm so excited that you've decided to take some time out of your day to join me and tune in. I hope you find this podcast uplifting and empowering. Let's get to it. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm so excited that you've taken some time out of your day to join me. Today, I am excited to have a conversation with Joelle. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's dive right in. And Joelle, I'm going to have you briefly introduce yourself, share a little bit about how you came to be working in the trauma space, and we'll start there.
Hey, well, my name is Joelle Casteix, and I live in Southern California, just south of Los Angeles. And I am a 53-year-old wife and mother, and advocate for adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And I got into the movement, because I'm a survivor. When I was in high school, I was sexually abused by one of my teachers at a large Catholic high school right here in town. And like, many of your listeners, if they've gone through trauma, will know, especially the trauma of child sexual abuse, predators target the easiest prey. And I was very much the easiest prey. I had problems at home. My mother was an alcoholic. And I was looking for mentorship. I was looking for an adult to help me. I was looking for all the things that kids want from an adult. I was not looking to be sexually abused. Mm-hmm. And he was my choir teacher, and I was being prepared to go into an opera conservatory. So he had a very important role in my life. So I was sexually abused over the course of 2 years. And in the end of that 2 years, I ended up pregnant with a sexually transmitted disease. And the worst part was that the school knew about it all along and covered it up. I was a stereotypical case in the Catholic sex abuse crisis, except the man who sexually abused me wasn't a priest. He was a lay teacher. So that was a lot of trauma. And I muddled my way through a lot of years afterward. And unlike a lot of trauma survivors, I didn't have the skills or capabilities to make good choices. So I ran from my problems. I got in a bad marriage. I had terrible relationships. And I was extremely self-destructive. And I realized that, it was not a healthy path for me. And one day I was in my late 20s, and I realized that if I continued on that path, if I continued making the decisions I was making, I wasn't going to live much longer. And in that decision, I'm like, okay, so here's my choice. I can live, or I can die. If I want to live, I have to make some serious changes. And so I did, and I, made some attempts to get my life together. I was working. I had a great job. I met my now husband. And then right around 2001, a kid who was sexually abused by my high school principal at a different school came forward and filed a lawsuit, said he was sexually abused. And his parents said, they went to the Diocese of Orange and said, can you just help us pay for counseling? And for those of you who aren't Catholic, a diocese is the area that oversees a certain border area of Catholic churches. And the Diocese of Orange, where I live, basically told this family to go pound sand. Just forget it. We're not helping you. And so they filed a lawsuit. And after 3 or 4 years, it ends up with a $5.2 million settlement. Nobody wanted the settlement. Nobody wanted that. They wanted the counseling. They wanted the exposure. They wanted the truth. And so I came forward then, and I tried to work with the diocese, and I realized they were just kind of using me as a patsy. So I came forward and I filed a lawsuit. And after a few years of litigation, I got more than 200 pages of documents about my case. And there was a signed confession from the man who abused me, saying he abused other kids. There was a signed confession from school administrators saying they knew about the abuse, from diocese officials saying they knew about the abuse. And so it was at that point I told myself, I can't let what happened to me happen to another kid. And I completely changed the trajectory of my career. I was in marketing and PR and decided I'm going to advocate for other survivors. And I've gone all over the country. I've been to Alaska, I've been to Guam working with survivors of abuse. I've done work in Europe and in Mexico. I've testified in front of numerous state legislatures to change laws to allow survivors to come forward, even if their criminal statute has passed. And that part was very rewarding. And then I got a whole new, I was taking on a whole new path though when I got pregnant with my son, because I had a whole lot of issues dealing with pregnancy because I terminated the pregnancy that I had with the teacher. There was no support there. I was 17 and I carried a lot of guilt and shame. And I remember when my husband and I had been married a couple years, I realized I was pregnant and I had this horrible flood of emotions that I hadn't felt in, 15, 20 years. And my husband had to look at me and say, Joelle, you're 34 years old and married. You're supposed to be pregnant. People are going to be happy for you. And so becoming a mother was a really difficult journey for me. There was a lot of aftermath of the trauma. I was one of those, nobody wanted to know that the pregnant lady was depressed and sad. And so, I didn't seek the help that I needed. But once my son was born, I realized that, this poor little guy, I'm his only chance. And I need to do everything I can to ensure that I can be the mom that he needs. And so that's when I also really pivoted into child protection and into the prevention space, because I realized that it's so funny because the title of your podcast, Mamahood After Trauma, is so powerful because it's learning that balance, because I think motherhood pulls you in so many different directions. And sometimes you think, well, I have to put the kids first and I can't take care of myself. And so many women, we struggle with, not putting ourselves first. And I think that the beauty is finding that balance and realizing that there is a way that the push-pull can turn into an attraction, and you can find warmth and healing in every interaction that you have with your child. And in that nurturing of them, you nurture yourself. And that was something that it took me, a little while to come to terms with. But I see as my son grows, he's 17 now, he's a senior in high school. He's the age I was when I was in the depths of my trauma. And I see this beautiful, bright, funny kid who, are you sure? You always get to take their temperature. I'm like, are you okay? Anything happen? Anything weird? He's like, Mom, I have a really nice life. And I'm like, are you sure you're 17? You seem awfully happy for a teenager. Aren't you supposed to be like all like upset and go off and stuff? No, this is great. I like my job. I like school. And so it's through the nurturing and growth of him, I've gotten a lot of personal satisfaction from that. But I work with a lot of trauma victims now. Because in numerous states, California, New York, New Jersey, Louisiana, Arkansas, we've opened up these laws that allow older survivors to come forward and use the civil justice system to expose what happened to them. And as people come forward, they have to face that trauma again, because with child sexual abuse, so many, depending on the age you were abused, you either stuff it down or you choose not to think of it. There's a whole interesting dynamic. Not interesting is not a fair word. It's a horrible dynamic for boys who are abused by men, especially like if you have the Boy Scouts or in the Catholic Church, where they are grappling with a whole different kind of shame about their sexuality and what does this make me and why am I keeping these secrets? And there's a whole additional burden there. For girls in the Catholic Church, we tended to accept the blame because it was our fault because we seduced men. So as I work with these survivors and process all of this, so many are parents and trying really hard to make sure that they set proper boundaries for their kids. And because abuse is a cycle, and you want to make sure that you get the healing that you need so that you are not fostering an environment where your child is fodder for abuse, and that you are making good decisions in your relationships so that your children are always protected by adults who have their best interests at heart. So it's very rewarding work. It's hard work. But I find that with the dawn of new media, I mean, like I wrote a book, but it's one of those where what parent has the time to read a great big fat book? So I cut up the chapters and I give those away. But with new media, with things like these podcasts and blogs and stuff, there's so much more information for parents and for trauma survivors and for everyone, just to get, find your particular path to healing, because the better and happier and healthier we all are, we can eradicate child sexual abuse in 3 to 4 generations if we all work. So that was a long story. So
it really is amazing how motherhood can bring forth a whole lot when, like you said, depending upon the age your trauma happened, you've either stuffed it down or it's wreaking havoc. And for me, it was my wake-up call. I didn't realize how much healing I needed to do and how messed up I was until I had a baby in my hands. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So what are some tips that you can share with our listeners who are maybe not very far in on their journey and they're feeling a little bit lost as to how to create those appropriate boundaries for their kids? How do they go about doing that and not allowing the fear to run the show?
Exactly. That is so important, because, fear has never saved a child from abuse.
No.
It has. I mean, when our kids get to an age, you teach them to properly cross the street. You don't say, oh my God, you gotta get hit by a car, don't cross the street. So you want to make sure that they have age appropriate skills and tools. And so I've worked with thousands of survivors, and they all said very, very simple, easy things. And then I went and did the research and realized, oh my God, this is right on. So the first thing that any parent, especially a parent who's a survivor of child sexual abuse and trauma, can do when that baby is born is ask for help. Get help. I mean, social media is wonderful, and social media can just wreak havoc, because you look at all these other moms and how happy they are and how beautiful their children are and this and that. And you're sitting there and your kid's screaming and you're tired and your trauma's coming back. And you're like, why aren't I like these other people? It's okay to ask for help. And if a therapist isn't the right route for you, ask a friend, ask a safe person, ask anyone for help, because you find that once, and this is something that I discovered, once I raised my hand and said, I really have pre and postpartum depression, people came out of the woodwork and they said, I had it too. We're afraid to talk about it, and, Brooke Shields did a lot to open up the discussion of that, but that was after my son was born. So, but talking about it is number one. And then now you have this beautiful baby in your hand and you're like, God, I don't want something to happen to this baby that happened to me. So it starts with things as easy as routine. You have an infant, routine is important. And I realize if you have many kids, the routine is kind of tough, but routine and boundaries are your baby's way of understanding love. And with a routine, as a parent, you are able to pick up if there are issues with your child, if your child is sick or if something's wrong or something's eating. If you have that routine, it's so much easier to pick up, because you know how your child acts and reacts in certain situations. And that's the very beginning. Get your child on a great routine, and because it makes them feel super safe. And then once they have language, this is really your opportunity to shine. And if your child is nonverbal, if your child's on the spectrum, I am not an expert in child safety there, but there are people who are. So if your child is on the spectrum or nonverbal, there are people who can help you to keep your kid safe. So, but your child is verbal, your child is moving forward with all their developmental milestones, and now they're starting to talk. Number one, you teach them the proper name, biological name of their body parts. And this is huge. This is like the number one way that a predator gets access to a kid is through the minimization and the infantilization of body parts. And I'll tell you a story about that. So I worked with a survivor, and she was sexually abused by a neighbor, and her family never said the proper biological names of their body parts because they were ashamed of that. I mean, I went to Catholic school. We couldn't say vagina. You got a detention. And so the neighbor was sitting next to her, and her family called her vagina and her genitals her ha-ha. And like all little kids are, she itched, and so she's scratching, and the guy sees the opportunity, says, "Oh, what are you doing?" She's like, "I'm scratching my ha-ha." And he's like, "Your ha-ha? I love to laugh. Let me see your ha-ha." And that was his way in. So when you teach your child proper biological names, a predator wants the easy prey. And if you teach your child this is your vagina, this is your penis, these are areas that no one looks at, no one touches, no one takes pictures of, and you don't take pictures of anyone else's, and you do it in like a fun way. You're taking a bath. What's this? Oh, this is my penis. Okay, who touches it? Nobody. And kids, they understand the importance of that, because if a predator sees if you change that situation and the girl scratches with you, "I'm scratching my vagina," the guys are like, "Okay, I'm out of here," because this kid is going to be able to tell the police exactly what this guy did. So you want to make sure that your kids have proper language. You want to make sure that you don't force them to hug or kiss adults who they don't want to, because if you say, "Oh, go hug grandpa," or "Go hug uncle so and so," and the kid doesn't want to, you're taking away their agency. So they realize that if an adult tells them to hug someone, then they have to do that. You want to really help them learn how to clean their bodies themselves. You want to make sure that they're confident on the toilet. You don't want a strange adult following them in there. And these are just all like simple things that you can do when your child is strong and assertive. So they have language, they have skills, they have capabilities. Then, it's time for your child to go to school. And, it was very, very tough for me to figure out what school I wanted my kid to go to, because I'm like, I'm leaving my kid with these people. I was sexually abused in a school. I don't want it to happen to my child. And so when you go in and you talk to the school, you just come out and ask, "So what are your policies and protocols when it comes to suspected child sexual abuse?" And if they say, "We don't know," or "Let me look for them," or whatever, you're like, go somewhere else.
Thanks, but no thanks.
They should have a written policy, and then they show it to you, and they're like, "Great. Does everyone know of this policy? Do you train on this policy?" And sometimes they say, "Well, I think we do." No, you want it everywhere. And so you continually reinforce your child's body autonomy. You continually reinforce that, when no one touches your penis, no one touches your vagina. When we go to the doctor, mom's in the room while the doctor examines you, because this is your body and your body's important. You don't say, "Oh, someone's going to get you." You just give them that body autonomy, that they realize this is their safe space. So as they get older, you really want to teach them, especially if they was in around the middle school age, with like 11, 12. The majority of survivors of child sexual abuse are going to disclose to their peers. And so you want to empower your kid to be able to handle that, because that's hard. Because someone comes up and says, "I have this secret," and you cannot tell anybody, so and so did this to me. And you want to make it perfectly clear to your kid, if someone comes to you and tells you this, you don't have to keep their secret, because it's not a good secret to keep. You need to tell mom is safe. And you tell your friend that my mom will help you. We will make sure that we do what we can so that this doesn't happen again. And what it does is it makes sure that your child isn't sucked in to that horrible pain and secret and shame. And talking about the secrets, it reminded me of one more that's very important, is once your child is old enough to understand, teach them a difference between secrets and surprises.
Mm-hmm.
You always have a no secrets rule. No secrets. Don't care. And even to say, oh, some secrets should be kept. Not when someone is 4. But there are surprises. So a surprise is something that we're all going to find out very, very soon. What's in that present? Well, that's a surprise. Don't tell dad what you put in the present. We will all find out very, very soon. So that's a great lesson for your kids. And then for all of us, I think a very important thing that we can do and continue to understand are what are the signs of predatory grooming. And for people who don't know, predatory grooming is how a predator tricks a child into thinking child sexual abuse is okay and natural and normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk for hours on that, but there's tons of great resources on the internet that show how predators use flattery and gifts and they blur sexual boundaries. And once you get on the internet, the grooming process is so much easier, because if a child is on their computer or on their phone in bed, they think they're totally safe. And it's really easy for someone to say, oh yeah, I'm a 12-year-old boy and I think you're really pretty. Let's go meet at the malt shop, when it's really some 40-year-old dude living in his mom's basement. So it's a big process. And the more research you do and understand the age appropriate behaviors that are necessary, limit your child's time online, make sure you observe it. So they're easy, simple things. And it sounds overwhelming because I get excited when I do these interviews, so I talk a lot. So don't feel overwhelmed, because there are tons of resources out there and tons of people who can help. And I firmly believe that there is far less child sexual abuse now than there was in the past. And the reason I strongly believe that because we're talking about it more. So you hear about it more. You hear about it in the newspapers and then on the internet and everything else, and you think, oh, my child's going to be kidnapped for a trafficking ring, and that really doesn't happen very much. But since we're talking about it, kids are disclosing more, and the more that kids disclose, the less that predators will abuse. So I really have a very positive outlook, because we're training our first responders, we're training our law enforcement, we're training doctors and teachers, and we're training our kids that these secrets aren't okay, and that they can be safe and autonomous and empowered, and they don't have to be subject to child sexual abuse.
Yes. Yeah. Those are amazing tips. So let's focus for a second on mama or dad who's healing. What are some things that they can do for themselves so that they're not projecting?
That's a tough one, because when you project on a child, you are projecting all of the worst things that you're feeling, and you're putting it on it. And if you don't do it intentionally, it just happens,
It happens.
So number one, if you as a parent, mom, dad, caregiver, whatever, if you feel you are projecting your own trauma on a child, go find help. And I find that peer support groups are exceptionally helpful, because you talk to other people who've been in that same position. And they are all over the place. And if you can't find one, you can very easily do one yourself. There are also many of them online. For men, the organization 1 in 6 does online male support groups. I know that SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, does online support groups, and they don't limit themselves to people who are sexually abused by clergy, because they realize that so many people need help. Understand that for an adult who has a child, and the adult has gone through this terrible trauma, it's okay to love and forgive yourself, and grant yourself grace. I think that we have all told ourselves, oh, I should have just shaken it off. Kids are resilient. Why is it bothering me so much? I must be weak. I must be wrong, so on and so forth. And when we understand brain science more and understand, especially when it comes to childhood trauma, whether it's sexual abuse, domestic abuse, neglect, malnutrition, any of those things, it affects the growth and development of the frontal cortex of that child's brain.
Mm-hmm.
It does. And it's a physical injury. And what it does is the frontal cortex is where we have all of our executive decision making, and that is underdeveloped. And
Mm-hmm.
our amygdala, which is where our fight or flight syndrome happens, is overdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I did a brain spect exam where through the Amen clinic, and they exam, and they're like, oh yeah, look, your amygdala is like 10 times the size of your, like, oh. And once you realize that your brain is doing its rotten best, and it's not a flaw on your part, it's not, you're not a bad person, you're not screwing up, it's like, you're like, oh my God, I could grant myself some grace here.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean, you go on. I went on medication and I found it extraordinarily helpful, but I find it equivalent to, it's like, God, my leg hurts, I don't understand, my leg's so stupid, it ruins everything, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get an x-ray and you realize your leg's broken.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't beat myself up so much.
Mm-hmm.
So we should do the same thing with our mental health. And so get the help you need, and we can retrain our brains, and it doesn't need to be medication. There, through guided meditation, which I find extraordinarily helpful. And you can get all kinds of great stuff free on the internet. And I mean like really good stuff free on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there are fantastic everyone, from scientists to people who specialize in meditation, who can help walk you through all this to help you rewire and retrain your brain and reset your thinking. I found that, especially if you are a survivor of childhood trauma and you have this child and you're projecting and you're scared, you wake up in the morning thinking, I'm a bad person, I've done something terribly wrong, and I'm not equipped to raise this child. How do you fix that? And there are ways to do that right when you wake up in the morning, and simple things. I mean, it's like when I first heard about it, I'm like, this is so hokey. Like, write down 5 affirmations, like, that's stupid. And day 5, I'm like, wow, I feel great. So those are amazing things that you can do, and it's easy, and it doesn't cost anything. Grant yourself that grace, guided meditations, affirmations, finding help and support, finding people who are going through what you're going through, because, child sexual abuse is pretty common. And once you put those feelers out there, you'll find that there are others who are struggling through that. So, as you grant yourself grace, and as you learn to slowly rewire your brain and your thinking, and you slowly fall in love with yourself again, it's a little bit every day. It's just a little bit every day, and it's doable. It's not like, you don't have to climb Mount Everest. You just do one small thing every day, because I'm telling you, if you are a trauma survivor and you have a child, that means that if you believe in God or the greater, whatever you believe in, you have been given the most precious gift in the whole world, because you deserve to have the most precious gift in the whole world, and you deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say, my trauma happened when I was, my mom abandoned me when I was 6 or 7 months old. And then I had sexual abuse and whatnot around the age of between 6 and 7. And life was hard for me growing up. I struggled with perfectionism because I believed that what I did earned me love. Anyway, all that to say, I was diagnosed a few months ago with PTSD. And for my whole life up until that point, it felt like there was a black cloud over my head. No matter what I did, no matter what therapist I spoke to, no matter what, it was there, and it was looming, and it was ominous. Those ominous black clouds that hang in the sky? Yeah. it felt like there was one over my head. And the moment that my doctor said, well, Emily, yeah, you've got PTSD. It was like the cloud just, and the sun could shine through. Because I could look back at my life, I'm very reflective, and I could say, whoa, my brain is not developmentally not functioning properly, and I still did all of that. Holy cow, I'm a badass.
Exactly. You are a badass.
So, friend, there is no shame in seeking out a diagnosis. It's not you making a mountain out of a molehill, and it can help. It can empower you.
Once you have, and as human beings, we love to label things because it gives us a path. It gives us a way to go forward. And medical science hasn't really, it's the brain was like the only organ that we would try to work with, but we didn't scan it. You couldn't take a biopsy of it. You didn't understand. And now that there's been so much amazing stuff with working with PTSD, and I'm shocked it took that long for you to get a diagnosis, because do you know what the ACEs study is? The adverse child, with abandonment and accessibility, you have a really high ACEs score. PTSD.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And no child, the fact that you made it through, and I totally get your perfectionist thing, because like I always get the therapist say, well, Joelle, write down things that you are, not things that you've done. And I'm like, oh no, I won't totally value me by my CV and my resume. Yeah. Who I am is what I do.
Yeah.
And perfectionism is a terrible lifestyle. It's the worst.
It is.
But having a name and then understanding, it's like, look at all the grace you're able to give yourself. And it's like, yeah, you are a badass. Look at what you've accomplished. And then you meet other people and you realize, wow, there are more modalities that help people with PTSD. There's like EMDR, and there's all these really cool things that they're doing that, and it's like, all you need is just that little diagnosis to be like, oh, I get it. This helps. And you know what? My heart just aches for the little you, as a child. I just want to hug that child and be like, my gosh, you're so perfect and everything. But now I look at you and I'm just like, high five, sister. You rock. You did it. You did it. Yeah.
How can our audience connect with you further if they would like to connect?
I have a webpage, casteix.com, Casteix. On that, you can get links to my books. I do give a bunch of them away, so make sure that you go through my website and look at the books there first, because some of them are for sale on Amazon, but just get the free download. It's better for you that way, because it's and I do have some great short free ebooks that are helpful for people. One that is really popular is called The Compassionate Response. And what that is a book for someone who has someone come to them and say, I was sexually abused as a child. Because nobody tells you what to do or say. So it has resources and how to talk to that person and how to set good, strong boundaries and how to help them without enabling them. So that's that. And I'm also on social media. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Joelle Casteix or J Casteix. And so in this, the hardest part of finding me is the spelling. So it's JoelleCasteix, and I'm very reachable. I love to talk to survivors, and I have all kinds of resources available for anyone who needs them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joelle, for joining me on the show today. Friends, make sure to click the link in the description so that you can find a link to Joelle's website, so you don't have to worry about the spelling, because I've linked it in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you resonated with what you heard, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share it with a friend who would also benefit, because we rise together. Until next time, Mama, keep shining.